once you sort of feel with the characters, once you're on that, you said it in your film in a really interesting way. Like once you're on that kind of layer or level with the characters, or feeling with the characters and moving with the characters, like once you're sort of there, then it's like, yeah, I mean, it can really wreck you. It can really just sort of end your day or your month.
Yeah, it's quite hard to untangle yourself from that relationship. Recently, I was in an exhibition, well, it's still going. There's an exhibition in France that I'm showing my game in, and also the video openings that I think you have seen. And then the title of the
Yeah.
exhibition is I Cried at the End of a Manga. And I just thought, well, I have. I have cried many times at the end of various materials. And I thought
That's
that was
right.
very fitting for the experience of interacting with these things.
Right, that sense of loss too. Like when it's finally over and you've been on this roller coaster ride and you're totally committed to the characters and to the story and to everything, and you realize that this is it. This is the last time it's gonna like it's over. The story is finished. It just I don't know. Like there's a sense of loss and just emptiness that sometimes overwhelms me.
Yeah, I think that is really true. I really felt that towards the end of Golden Kamuy, which I don't know if you've read, but like, well, I mean, because of the nature of the story, some people have to die. And then when they started dying, it was just so devastating.
I'm only watching the anime, so I'm not quite caught up with it. We've had a couple deaths so far, but nothing that was like too devastating. But it's like, I was telling my partner that I think that some people have to go. Like
Yeah, like,
it's just some people are gonna have to go.
yeah, it's really sad because, yeah, because if everyone survived this intense setup, like, it just, like, the story would not, like, hold itself together. It just makes no sense. Like, tragically, they're not all just friends hanging out and making food together, which is how they should be.
That's right. That's right. At their best moments, they're just like in onsen wrestling and like having a good time, and then you realize that wait a minute,
It's
this is
like, oh
not going to go
God.
well. I did. I liked it a lot. I mean, it's sort of alongside openings together.
Mm,
It's a really interesting sort of conversation being had about trains and traveling, and then liminality, and this kind of desire you have, like this repetition of the image of you holding your hand up to the sky and watching outside the train. It was really interesting to sort of see how there's as a particular problematic that happens in your work that it's becoming sharper and sharper, and your sort of poetics are also becoming really powerful, which is it was I loved it. It
oh,
was fantastic.
I'm so glad. It's interesting that you would like pair them together because, well, first of all, I do think that all of my work connects together. I see it as like, I don't want to call it a cinematic universe, but like they all tie together. I feel like the core is always shared. But then also it's like, because openings is like so intense and fast. But then this video, I feel like, well, at least I tried to make it slow and maybe like allow myself to be a bit more poetic because I think often I can get boggled down with like, oh no, it has to make sense, whatever that means, or I don't have like, I mean, I have like medium confidence in my writing, but I think when it gets a bit more experimental and it's still not even that experimental, I start to lose that confidence. So with this video, I tried to be like, oh, it's okay to be vague, and it's precisely that vagueness that I think can communicate what I want to say. But I think that
Yeah,
was something that was
absolutely.
different in openings.
Yeah, where at openings you had like citations and you were talking about Lamar and stuff like that. So it was a little bit more like it felt sort of like a paper. Whereas here you have a little bit more of this space to breathe. Like so the difference between going to the euphonium
Mm,
locations and openings and then going to 5 centimeters a second in here, it's like you gave it time to breathe. Where it's like this is this crossing, and like it was almost too real. Like it felt so beautiful to sort of see like this crossing, and you're like, well, this is the crossing. Here it is. That's different than it used to be, but let's take a look at it. And then you sort of cross over to the other side, and the train comes in the back, and then you're posing with it and everything. It's just like it had enough time to really be this moment that I think I'm going to remember for a very long time. It was beautiful.
oh, I'm really glad. I quite enjoyed that part of like making it look like a YouTube video because partially because, well, there's a number of YouTube videos about like anime pilgrimages, which I used as a reference. But then also I just tried to think back to when I did my first anime pilgrimage, which was in like 2016, I think. And it was to that crossing. But also I really wanted to go on the train journey that Takaki takes in the film, like to Iwafune and Tochigi. But then at the time there were barely any English language resources and I did not speak Japanese. So I was just like trying to piece through this information from I had this art book with some of the background art from the film, and then sometimes they had little annotations with like station names. So I was like getting it from there and looking at the film very hard. And also like looking at a few people were making YouTube videos, and then I was like trying to see if they had like map inserts that I could look at for reference. And then I thought it would be nice to talk back to this. And also I'm very satisfied with how I made it look exactly like a YouTube layout, which then I showed to friends, very excited, like, look, I made the YouTube layout. And then I think everyone thought that I just recorded it on YouTube, and then no one was impressed. And I realized, oh, I just made the YouTube layout. That's not, yeah, it's not that much of an achievement.
No, for sure. I think those moments, it's kind of like it reminds me of in openings when you recreated the lane transition. Like I think when you recreate these things, like there, it's such a satisfying moment that this is it all fits together in this perfect way, and it's you can tell that there's a craftsmanship to what you're doing, that to the creation of the film and the video itself that I think is fantastic.
And also the recreation of scenes is very central to my work, because even the bits that maybe you can't quite tell are recreated, or like not everyone gets the reference, not that the reference has to be got. Often they are like responses to things that I have seen in anime and other things. So like for example, in this one, actually in this one I made a lot of like new scenes that were not necessarily references, but like the beginning bit where like yourself is up in the sky floating amongst some clouds. Like that was after watching End of Evangelion, because there's this scene where I think Shinji floats in the sky and then the clouds move in a very effective way. And then I thought, whoa, that's extremely good. I will try and make this myself. Um, and then also like the bit towards the end when it's kind of like yourself in the dark landscape with these like shards in their hand. And then there's like a zoom in the face. That's entirely based on a little cinematic that they showed in the second Idolish 7 concert that they did with all the different groups. And then Rivada, they sing Hoshiku Zuna Majiku. And then they made this cinematic in the beginning. And then when I was watching that, I just thought that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I really wanted to include it. And then I bought the DVD, so I had a high definition reference to work from.
You have to. When it comes to Idolish 7, you've got to buy all the DVDs and all the high res stuff. You've got to do it because this is art. I mean it. Like I love Idolish 7 so much. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah,
I've gone to concerts now. I've gone to
ah,
pilgrimages of certain particular places. Like I just love it so much.
it is so good. Oh, which pilgrimages did you go to? I've only ever been on one, to the cafe where Rivara originally meet in Kamakura.
Yeah, so I think it's more kind of like what you were saying in your film, where it's kind of like moments where you try to capture like a side street or like the passing by of a car. Like I don't know what it
Mm,
is, but it's like just being in the city, and then especially certain parts of the city, you sort of get this sense of like this is where Idolish 7 might be set, is where it might exist. So it's more like a general sense. Like it wasn't like a shot for shot reproduction or anything like that, but it's just
mm,
like I find myself thinking of Idolish 7 a lot as I travel to the city.
yeah. Kind of like, 'cause you get like a very like three-dimensional sense of them like being there, like, oh, this is where they live. This is where they stand. And then you can kind of like not like see them standing there, but kind of like have this sense of like, oh, there's someone here that is not present. At least sometimes it can feel like this.
Right, or kind of like that effect you were doing, where it's sort of flickering between the two, like present and absent at the same time.
Mm,
It's always kind of like depending on how you're looking at it, it's in focus or it appears, and then if you sort of turn your eye just a little bit differently, it disappears and there's nothing there at all, right? So that
yeah,
there's this beautiful kind of impermanence to it.
yeah, and I feel like that is at the heart of the experience. Sometimes, actually, since you mentioned like the shot-for-shot recreations of places, how do you feel about that like segment of anime pilgrimage? Because that's something that I always see. It exists. I like to look at the shot-for-shot recreations. But I feel like I do the pilgrimages for a very different reason. or like just the motivations are not the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can do the pilgrimages, right? When I came back to Tokyo after being away for quite a, sort of being away for a little bit, came back, and then I was going to the airport. They have maps now of all these different, tilges you can go on. They have like places mapped out on this big billboard, just like here, go here and visit this anime, and go here and visit this anime. So it's becoming a lot more professionalized. And I think that if you go for those reasons, like to take a picture of the staircase that was in this particular animation or something, right? Like go to Akihabara to take a picture of the Love Live staircase, the shrine. There's a particular way of doing it, but yeah, I think I'm with you. Like I kind of wonder that that's one way to enjoy the experience, but another way I think is to try to sort of move through that space, like run up the stairs, like sort of feel
Mm-hmm.
what it might be like to be like a character that was training every morning, going up the staircases with her friends. So I think sometimes it becomes really very scripted, like this particular image
Mm,
is to be reproduced. And I do worry about that because I mean, I have in the back of my mind things like, Timothy Mitchell and like colonizing Egypt and like these terrible examples where, the image becomes in some ways over determining of the actual reality. And then it makes us feel like we already know where we are. Whereas
yeah.
what I love about your work is that you actually don't know where you are, right? You know where you are, but when you're there, it feels like you're somewhere else at the same time.
Mm,
So it isn't a kind of settled feeling; it's an unsettled feeling, which I think is it's a very different way of experiencing seichi junrei, right?
yeah. Oh, actually, that is what I think. I was talking to someone recently, a person called Paul O'Corn. I don't know how you pronounce his surname. And then I was speaking to him, and then he was asking me like, "Oh, what is it that I seek?" Because so many people do this, the recreations of the pictures. Whether I do this myself, and partially I don't, because I don't really know. I don't have a camera, so I use my phone, which is limited in terms of angles. Also, I'm not that deeply interested. And then we were like talking about like how I think I like to look at the same place that shows up, but like from a different angle, or like just walk through it and then back, and then kind of like because like you already have the angle that is in the anime, and like that kind of time of the place that is fixed, and then we have that, but like you haven't like seen where the character went after. You haven't seen it from like as like a location from like different ways that can be experienced. And it's kind of like by removing yourself from like the determination of like that one shot, it like I think that's what allows you to kind of enter the realm of the work as opposed to just the place that you're looking at.
That's a great distinction to make as well. Like enter the play or reproduce the place or enter the realm, like to be moving around the realm or to be sort of stuck in place where you sort of know where you are. Because one thing that I kind of like seeing those maps in the airport, something that sort of bothered me about that a little bit is this kind of like see Japan and Japan is beautiful and it's fantastic and it kind of gets into this cool Japan rhetoric
Mm,
and it made me think when I was still, far away in Alaska watching anime in the 80s, I didn't think of Japan. I thought of anime, right? And like that's the world I wanted to visit was this world of color and movement and, cool guys and gals and all this movement and creativity that I saw there. So so to then tie it back to a particular place, it's kind of like the next step what you're talking about. You tie it to a particular angle, a particular shape of the road or whatever. You say, okay, well, this is the aesthetics of a particular Japan. Come visit that country or come visit that spot. And it kind of
mm,
becomes more and more overdetermined by these kinds of ideologies, right?
yeah. And then also then because you mentioned the cool Japan thing, it's like the people that like many of the people that tend to do this like tying it together to a certain ideology or like a grand scheme, the cool Japan phenomenon. It's like it's always these like massive corporations and or the government. Um, and then they will produce like what is worth like what is a place worth visiting and what is worth being looked at in what way. So it's like this like top-down determination of how you will experience certain materials. And then part of what really appears to me about fandom in general, but also like the pilgrimages, is that like it's like the grassroots organization level of it. Like I don't want Kadokawa Corporation to give me a map of where to go. I want to go on some random guy's blog that has been doing this for 20 years and then has these massive data sets and then I want to parse these things, and then I want to collect my own things. Like when I went to the euphonium location, I just found this PDF map that someone, just some random guy, or like guy said in the way of gender neutral, just some random person made on their blog, and then I printed it at the convenience store. Actually, I think this is referred to in the video itself. Like finding a map, printing it yourself, and then it's just like it's not good quality. It's just like made by someone in like with their like arbitrary Photoshop skills, and then using that to connect to these realms, and that's part of what makes them special. It's not like a route, and tourism as an experience is not provided to me by some grand entity.
Right, absolutely. And so then you have the sort of anime that are made specifically to reproduce place. And like
Yeah.
so Love Live in Harajuku, or Love Live in Akihabara, or Love Live in Odaiba. And then this kind of creates a particular sort of space that is great for tourism, but it becomes more of an advertisement instead of, being the way that I think it was for a lot of people in the beginning, which was you hunted for a location, like you were saying. Like
Mm.
it wasn't clear where it was. Like, where is Free actually set? We don't know where it's set. So then you figure out, well, the shape of the bay in this particular school, it must be located in this area. And then people go and they actually do field work and they find out, oh yes, this is kind of where it is. It's not the same, of course, because it's not the animation, but walking through that space allows you to connect to the characters and to their world in a new way. And it's kind of really bottom up organic, right? To sort of, in the inverse of what you were talking about, where it can be sort of top down manufactured.
Also, when the top-down manufacturing is present, it's like they are telling you how to consume a certain material. And I kind of feel like, oh, what was I seeing recently? I wonder. I saw some meme about like people's relationship to like, various medias, and then about the word of like consuming a media, and then I don't know what other word they used. Maybe they used interacting, watching, who knows? But the point was that it's kind of like consumption is kind of like you are provided a product, you consume the product, like done, end of the line.
Yeah.
And then whereas the kind of like the watching, or like actually like experiencing the content, then you think about it, then you look at various gaps in it, and then you try to fill the gaps yourself, and then you talk to other people about it, and then you generate all these new ideas and like layers of creativity, and then you look into the background, and then you just keep interacting in ways that are not controlled by the like either like the entity that released it, or like just like certain ideologies that may be in the work itself. It's kind of like all these interactions that are still within the material, but also outside of the material at the same time. And I think when like so much of how the material can be consumed and interacted with is like already provided to you with like a clear infrastructure, then I think like why would you steer away from the infrastructure? Because it's so comfortable to just stay within whatever is given to you.
Exactly. It becomes this really comfortable way that you can enjoy pilgrimage, but like without doing that sort of searching work and self-reflexivity. And then, as you mentioned in your video, your film, this sort of way that, it's an individual, but also a collective imagination. So connecting to other people who are also working through that space, Again, one thing I really like about your work is that it sort of it shows us this in a very different way. So it's like, okay, you're traveling between the different places, and you're sort of trying to find this location or reproduce this particular moment, whether it be on the train or off the train, walking. But then what happens is you say that there's spaces where the virtual is closer, right, to reality. So it's almost like, like a Hosoda Mamoru film. You slip,
Mm.
right, into another space, right? And that slippage is what is really interesting because, you never know when it's going to happen. It could be when you're on the train. It could be when you're walking. It could be, you see someone else like go into a different story. You're like, well, that person was on the same pilgrimage, right? Maybe I should follow them into that place. And it's like inside you find this great location that's full of life and love for the characters and everything. And then that becomes part of your pilgrimage. So it's kind of like, I think that the thing that you said in your most recent piece about the virtual becoming closer to reality in particular places was really spot on. And it's like
Oh,
we're searching for that moment when we slip a little bit, or we're transported in space and time.
indeed, that is true. I quite like the word of slipping because that kind of takes away the control from it. because I think it's something that you can't fully be be in control of. Like you can't be like, I'm gonna go here and then I'm gonna enter the virtual and then that's done. I feel like a lot of it is trying to like kind of like circling this area where the virtual is closer. If you know where it may be, like for example the rail crossing, and then kind of hoping for this second in which like your eyes go a bit funny and then like things overlap and you're like, ah yes, I am partially there. But then this can also come up when you like just like being on the train. Like for example, the opening scene of the video, I think, or like not the opening scene, but one of the first few scenes is just like the train landscape and then like a reflection of the train windows from the other side overlaid on top of it. At least that's what it's meant to be. That was just something that I just happened to see on a train, and then I felt like, oh, this exemplifies like so much of this mixing and slippage that I'm trying to decide. It felt like a moment of like truly being somewhere else.
I also loved what you were doing with screens, where these kind of flat surfaces, these spaces of visual play exist all around us, right? So, you know, it could be a wall, it could be someone's face, it could be a particular configuration of trains moving in space, you know, in time. But something about this kind of like gets us away from the here and now, right? So we're kind of somewhere else while we're still in there is only here and now, as you say, but at the same time, like you're able to sort of fold in other
Mm.
possibilities.
The folding is a very good way to put it. That's kind of how I think of it. Like the reality like folds in on itself, and then you are kind of surrounded by these two things at the same time, or not two, maybe it's multiple. And then like with the various ubiquitous scenes, especially in like a city environment, I think it's just there's so much information. I think it's very easy to kind of slip into this strange non-place in the middle of it all. And then also just like even just like how many like of these image words are like present in our lives. Because like even if you are not into anime or like you don't play games, you don't look at that many virtual realms, like still like the screens are there in the city, the posters, the advertising, your phone, even if it's an old phone, it will have some kind of like something that like denotes the area where the phone ends and then life begins, and then you kind of interact with these things that are not quite of this word.
Watching through the video, something that sort of came to my mind was, remember that scene in Paprika where she's sort of slipping between the different surfaces, right? So it's on the side of a truck, and then it's, you know, in an advertisement, then it's on a screen, and then it's someone's face, and then it's actually in person. Then it's like in a McDonald's, in the reflection of the mirror, she appears, and then as she turns, she disappears again. Like this constant way in which she's present across all these different surfaces. I mean, for me, that was the most exhilarating part of the whole film. I mean, it's a
Mm,
great film to begin with, but just the way in which they opened it up with this movement across surfaces where everything becomes a screen to project, or not even project her. That's too simplistic. It's she's moving across the screens in a way that if we were there, we might actually be able to capture a moment when we see her kind of in that reflection of her reflection of her reflection.
yeah, like this system of all these like interconnecting surfaces that kind of exemplify the place that is not here, and then the way that you can slip between them. And then I quite like the way of taking it outside of the realm of like new technologies, because I think this is an experience that you can have on like so many, like even just like the reflective surface of a lake. I think that is like a prime place for any of these interactions to start happening.
And also to sort of continue with the paprika thing, I think that your idea of sort of tying this to dreams too, where it's like fragments and pieces and it's partial, and you're always kind of like, you're hazily or fuzzily aware of it, but never quite. Like you can't capture it and like trace, well, what was the dream? That's the kind of fiction of psychoanalysis, right? That we can figure out
Mm,
exactly what the dream is and what it means, right? And then we can sort of figure out where we belong, right? The bearded man is my uncle, and blah blah blah, right? Instead of that, what you have is this kind of way where I feel like I've been here before in a dream, and that opens up this
mm.
possibility of sort of blurring the edges and allowing for things to sort of snap into focus in different ways, right?
Yeah, or like you can't quite tell where the experience took place or like which layer you're standing on. Yeah, just like not being able to tell like where something originates from and then where it ends, and then whether these are like separate, distinct places that do not mix and are just lined up, or if there's like a mixing between them. And I always think that there's a mixing because I feel like it's impossible to separate like the real from that which is not real. even when you remove all these technologies from the equation. But the interesting thing about the dreams is that, well, first, like I read somewhere that so supposedly it's like when you recall a dream, um, like the more you can recall it, like the more of it is just like your brain in the moment, like trying to fill in the gaps of these like strange flashes that you have seen. So it's like you can't, like the recalling of the dream as a separate entity that you have witnessed is not possible because the brain is going to be filling in the gaps. And then I kind of feel like, what this really like maps on really well onto trying to see these like fragmented realities that are like all around us. But then also you use the wording of like my choice of using the dream to kind of tie into this is actually, I find it very interesting because I don't feel like it was a choice. I felt like like as I was writing this video, I just felt like I just kept coming across the word dream in various texts. And the beginning of it was like the first two lines of the video are the same lines that are before the end scene of 5 centimeters per second, trying to like recall this dream before like their voices like overlap and then they enter this musical sequence. That is one of my most favorite pieces of animation of all time. But then also I just kept listening to songs that I felt like grasped the experience of what I wanted to describe, and then the word dream just kept showing up. And I don't care about dreams that much personally. I do now, but I didn't. Because my dreams are not particularly exciting or weird. I barely remember them. So I never really gave them that much thought. Also, I feel like it's kind of like a too easy subject to focus on. Yeah, well, I just never considered them. And then I feel like the dream kept coming to me. And then I had to look at it. And then I discovered how it ties into this like strange, uncertain relationship between something that you're looking at or trying to recall in certain places.
Mm-hmm. Almost like that deja vu thing where you've encountered this before, right? And you think that it must be in reality, but it might be in a dream. But this kind of like this sense that I've been here before. It seems like that's kind of the sense you're getting when you're at like that crossing. It's like I've been here before. Well, the right side is the left side's different now, but at the same
Mm,
time, it's I've been here. Like you said, that I think I've been here for 10 years before I ever came here, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
I thought that that was such a great line. It's like, yeah, I mean, you've sort of been at that crossing if you were in the moment, as I think a lot of us were. I still think that's probably Shinkai's greatest film, but if you're
I
in
also
the,
agree.
if you're in that moment, then you were at that crossing too. And also the sort of way that I think this is kind of where the utopian aspect of your work comes in. And if I may say so, I think that there's a kind of way in which there's a joyfulness and happiness to it, which, I can never reach it and never quite reach it. Sounds like it's a bad thing, but at the same time, it's like, no, actually, being at that crossing and seeing it from a different angle opens up a whole new realm of possibilities, of places
Mm,
to move and people to meet and things to experience. So it doesn't have to be, like in 5 centimeters a second. It doesn't have to be like that moment where it's like, well, okay, look, this is actually the end, right? This is the end for him. It's the end for them. It's the end, right? And then so instead of that, you could say, well, actually, this is the beginning of something, right? It's opening into a new space or new realm of movement and possibility for me in this world, right? Which is
mm.
which is always, as you said, always engaged with the other world.
I think that's very true. Also, I really like the word of like using the word utopia for this because well, partially I think I do retain some utopian beliefs, which I think can be a fault and can be a good thing. But a lot of this, well, I mean, I think I always felt like that, like you can't like stop in these places. Like you have to look towards something else. Like there is something meaningful in like the reaching out, like this motion of like looking for something that is not present. But then I was reading this book by Jose Esteban Munoz called Cruising Utopia, which is about queer utopias. And then in it, he talks about queerness as this thing that, first of all, does not exist in the here and now, and also kind of something that cannot exist, because queerness is like, and queer hope is defined by this action of looking at something that does not yet exist and looking towards it, and then using the creative space and the potential that is born from this motion of looking towards a horizon that is not yet here. And that's what creates queerness. Like queerness is only possible when you are moving towards a kind of queerness that does not yet exist. Like it cannot
Mm-hmm.
be like still waters. And I think it's exactly this relationship. And also like for me, like queerness obviously ties into a lot of my work because, well, I mean, I am queer. Can it not tie into it? But also like fandom is so often queer as well, especially in my experiences. And then this like idea of like having something and then you take it and then you look towards something that is not yet there and then you keep looking and then you keep generating new things in the space, often with others. And then there is kind of this like utopian vision of this like endless potential, but I do think that it exists, and I feel like there is the same energy and sense of motion that I think fills this like endless search for these places that are not of this world that I keep being on, and they kind of fill me with and like an excess of joy.
Hmm. Exactly. And there's a kind of joyfulness in your work that I think is it's so refreshing to see, where it's like you're traveling on a train, but it's not just traveling on a train. You're visiting a crosswalk, but it's not just visiting a crosswalk. You're sitting in a train station. It's not just sitting in a train station, right? These are spaces that could be a nowhere for other people, but instead it's a somewhere for you. And it's like multiple somewheres layered on top of each other that allows for this kind of movement out of place and time. And you're absolutely right that it makes total sense to sort of invoke Munoz here, because you're looking at the horizon, but you're also looking at kind of like how time is folding in on itself to open up into new possibilities, right?
Mm. And I kind of feel like this is something, well, I feel like that maybe this is something that, maybe this is the thought that the video ends on as well. This like not being willing to let go of this desire to grasp something that is ultimately ingraspable because it can only exist. Like the thing I'm looking for is like something that only exists when it's moving away from me. And if it stops moving, then it stops being the thing I'm looking for. So it's like ultimate like I will not be able to win. Like I will never be able to like as long as I'm like, you know, like tied down by this like strange like human existence, and then I cannot see it, but then I refuse to stop looking for it. And then I think this is something that will just like keep taking me forward, and maybe that's what feels like, oh, maybe this is the only way I can ever end a piece of work on, because that will always have to be the conclusion.
That there is that kind of excess or other or something that is there, right? Now, absolutely. You sort of think about people who look at it the other way around, where it's a lack, right? So there's something missing, and I'm always searching for it, and I always find the same things that are replacement objects, and I kind of continue on forever and ever in this empty cycle until I expire. Like that's
Mm,
a really depressive way to think about it. Whereas for you, like that scene of you up in the clouds, it's so fantastic because it's an image that it's like it's what utopia might feel like, a direct kind of experience of material of the kind of materiality of things. We're up there in the sky and you're feeling kind of the clouds around you. And it reminds me so much of like Tezuko Osamu, who said something to the effect of like clouds changing shape are eroticism to me, right?
mm,
The dancer's body in motion, whether female, male, right? The horse running across the plain, all these things are eroticism for me. And then he says, I pursued animation to basically find that eroticism. And I think that, you know, you sort of, and again, that's not quite, it's, I'm folding my own sort of thoughts on top of your own here, but that moment when you're up in the clouds and you're sort of surrounded by all that movement and all that possibility and that freedom of motion and feeling, it might have been what he was feeling himself when he said clouds are this kind of amazing thing for me.
mm. I think so. Like I feel like when you said that thing about like the horse like running across the field and that kind of stuff, like on a personal scale, I don't care that much for horses. They scare me. But like the heart of what he's trying to say. I mean, not that I can know the heart of Tezuka Osamu, but it feels like there is a shared thing, and like and the idea of like him going into animation to try and grasp this movement, this eroticism that he describes, feels so beautiful because then it makes me think of there's a very famous quote from an animator called Norman McLaren that I think roughly speaks about like how what's important in animation is not what is on each frame that you're animating, but the movement that happens as you flip from one frame to the next. It's like it's the space between the frames where the movement is. It's not on the frames of the animation. And then it's kind
Yes.
of like, and then also in part of me, I mean, this is a tangent very much, but I have a general liking of animation that is a bit choppy, or like when you can't tell that it's animated. Like I don't like it when the movement is too full because it's
Too
like I don't
full.
know, like my eyes can see, I can already see how a horse runs across the field. Then it's kind of like if you like let the gaps exist between the frames, like that is where the movement occurs that you kind of feel on this level of affect. Like something that
Mm.
is not seen but like felt in your core as like a yeah, like affect is the only word to put it. Um and then that is kind of like what Norman McLaren just describes as being between the frames of animation.
But at the same time, sometimes the liveness kind of amps up too much, like early Disney cartoons, like
Mm,
where everything's alive, right? The grass is moving and the trees are moving, and people are dancing in motion, and the skeletons are moving now, and like everything is alive, even if it's dead, it's alive because of this kind of excessive vitality that he put into
mm,
those early cartoons.
it's kind of like they're all looking at the same thing but from just like the different like I don't know, maybe if it's all a circle, they just happen to go in different directions on the circle. And then it's all like kind of converges in this core area where you have this like excessive sense of vitality that kind of like makes you a bit like uncomfortable in a way, like, oh, this is outside of the human.
That's right. That's right. This sort of non-human, and I think that that was another thing I loved about your film. I'm sort of gushing a little bit, but another thing I liked about it was when you were talking about how if the movement occurs correctly, so the coordinates are correct, or the movement around you is correct, or the sort of different layers line up in a particular way, you can almost slip into the animated layer yourself, like the character layer, which is what you do in your films. You become an animated character, right? And
Mm.
you sort of move across these layers, and you're saying that there's a kind of joyfulness in moving across the layers, which I thought was so well stated. It's so smart to think about, well, how we can become characters or become like animatic in our movement.
And also something I quite like to think about as of recently is especially when I go around the rail crossing in the film. Because I think I heavily suspect, I mean, I don't, I feel like there may be information about this, where like Shinkai's studio was when he made 5 centimeters per second, but I think it was in the area. And then I read in some book about his work that he chose the song that plays in the end scene. Um, what's the guy's name? The One More Time, One More
Oh
Chance song.
yeah, Masayoshi,
Yeah,
something like
is
that.
it Yamamoto?
That's
Yama
it. I think that's it.
something,
I think that's it.
possibly. Yeah, and then it said that he chose that song because as he was making the work, sometimes he would need breaks or like feel stuck, and then he would just walk around the neighborhood, go into the convenience store, and then when he went into a certain convenience store that starts with L and ends with awesome, he just heard them playing this song, and then that gave him this moment of like, ah, this is the song. Because like the song was not made for the film that existed from before, which I quite love because that kind of is the same sense of like taking something that was made for a very different purpose and then like making it part of your reality. And I just love to think about this idea of like, okay, so this scene is in the anime, not just the crossing, but like any scene, but just to think about like someone came here with a camera for location scouting, like someone on the other side of the work. So it's kind of like if I think of the work as this kind of like border or like a wall between different realities. And then I'm on one side who has seen it and then is now trying to get into it. And then there's the other side of people who made it and then worked in towards making it what it is. And I like to think about like the people that came before me and before the anime, like looking for the place in the real world that will then become the anime. That has for me then become the real world again.
Yeah, for sure. Like the opening, right? The space that they found that sort of opens into another possible space, right? That they've found it, and then they're sort of presenting it to you, that you find it, and it's kind of a continual process of discovery, where it doesn't end, with a reproduction. I think that's the most sterile version, when it ends with the taking of a photograph of the thing. It's like, well, now I've seen it. Okay, I've
Mm.
seen Shinkai's thing, right? Whereas what you're saying, like moving across the countryside in a car and listening to 80s pop music like he does in Suzume, right? Like Suzume. And then like in that particular film, you have this moment when it's like the jiving of the music, the people's vibes going through the countryside together, like it's almost like you could be there. Like I felt like almost like I was called out by that scene. You can experience that regardless of what road you're on, right? Music can
Yeah.
take you there, or the particular lighting can take you there, the movement through color. An anthropologist I love called it sailing through color, right? So
Oh,
as you sail through color, right, you're entering into that animated space, right?
that's a very nice way of putting it. Sailing through color. I'm making a note.
So I think we're all kind of like converging on similar ideas, and that's why I think that your film speaks to it in such a really eloquent way, where it's like, yes, it's about seichi junrei, but it's also about the experience of space in a way that isn't like you're looking for depth or positionality. You're looking instead for a kind of movement across surface without positionality, right? Because it's kind of like you're moving, and as you move, you transform and change. So it's almost like what you're presenting isn't really even, Cartesian space with self and other and that kind of thing. It's not
Mm,
the same sort of space anymore. It becomes a space that is constantly transforming and becoming something other than it once was, right? Through this kind of constant layering and movement through and across layers. And again, just one more thing that I love about your film is that it doesn't sort of position itself as an anti-politics. It's not like, well, this is bad, therefore let's go against this. It's like, well, no, actually, other ways of existing and other ways of seeing and being already exist, right? If we
mm,
just sort of position ourselves differently with others and then communicate and look and feel and imagine differently, then we can move differently in the world. So it's kind of like you have this alter politics in a very real way. It's not anti, it's alter by saying that, just like in anthropology, saying that another way of existing, another way of perceiving already is there, right? So we don't have to, don't have to wonder. This isn't a 1960s utopian moment. It's like imagine a world where we're not doing that, right? What we're saying is, in fact, it already exists. It's
mm.
there. It's already there, right? If you can perceive it, right? You have this kind of wave of people who are coming into anime who are all, you know, exactly as you said, we're already here, and we love this for what it is, but we want something a little bit different, right? We don't want the same old ossified forms to be reproduced. We want something that's more speaking to, like the Pure Cure situation, Pretty Cure, where it's like,
Mm,
well, where every person can be a magical girl, right? And that, animals can be magical girls. All these
yeah.
different
And
animals
now
can be
there's a
magical.
boy precure.
There's a boy Pure Cure, and all this I think is like that's the kind of moment that I think that we can see animation as doing some really great work, because it opens our mind to the idea that we don't have to be the way we are. We could be something other than what we are. Yeah. So one thing I think is really interesting about your work is that you're clearly such a fan. Like you know this work so well. You've lived it. You've experienced it. You've followed it for years at a time, and then you're kind of like reproducing it in your theoretical and poetic analysis, which I think is fantastic. But do you ever kind of feel like there's a tension between being a fan and being a theoretician?
Like I think sometimes there's a sense of like fandom is uncritical, which is I think
Yeah.
very untrue. Well, I mean, yeah, it can be untrue. It's not like fandom is a monolith. You can't make a statement like that. But some like so often I feel like no, like the fandom is like the fans are not like fans are not stupid, and like you can love something and be critical of it at the same time. And then I feel like sometimes this is something that like gets lost when like fandom is discussed, and then like the whole like you're either a fan or you're critical, and then but I think often you're a fan and you're critical. Like for example, I don't know any fans of Naruto, including myself, who actually thinks it's like a good, piece of media. Like kind of like yeah, like when people ask me like, "Oh, you love Naruto? I'm gonna watch it myself," and I'm just like, "Well, like I told you I loved it. I didn't tell you it was good." It's like at your own risk,
Mm.
my friend. Like, but also it is good, but then also it is horrible. So it's like this kind of strange internal tension. But then maybe that's already inside being a fan of something. you can like rework the materials that you're looking at. It's kind of like a complex relationship. Like I think about Harry Potter a fair amount because I grew up like loving it, obviously, is the reason why I learned English, the language. And like I've been writing Harry Potter fan fiction since I started writing it when I was 12, and then I got really involved in this like Harry Potter based fan community in Hungary. And then I still have loads of friends from this time, and then it allows for like a lot of intergenerational relationships because of this fan fiction, and the fan fiction was obviously always queer. And then now J.K. Rowling is like absolutely running wild with the transphobia. I cannot look at Harry Potter anymore because she has ruined it, which is really sad. But then also at the same time, I think like 90% of those people that I have from this community in my life, like they're all queer. Like we are all reworking this horrible material in ways that allow for like radical new queer realities in our present. So it's like she can't take this from us. J.K. Rowling can't negate this immediately. But then also there's things like, you know, if I was to buy something Harry Potter related now, the money would go to her. So obviously I don't want to do that. But like thankfully piracy is still a thing. But then again, I can't look at Harry Potter anymore because she's too terrible. But yeah, it's just like strange space to be in.
How you sort of see yourself connected to the author in a particular way. Like if I am a fan of this work, or if I am engaged in the fan activities around this work, am I supporting, am I giving air to, am I giving more attention, economy, cred to this particular person and their work? You know, it's something that happens in academia too. Like just to kind of go
Oh
back to
yeah.
our original question of like academia and fandom. I think sometimes it feels like academia, a fandom can be like, well, you're too close to the object, therefore you can't be critical.
Mm.
And as you mentioned, that's not true. You can be critical and close to the object. The other way around, I think when academia, sometimes people will say things like, you know, I'm a Heideggerian. And it's like, well, okay, that comes with some baggage because this person is known
Mm.
for, you know, their particular stance on race and relations and things like that, this nature. Well, I mean, beloved by the Nazis. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So not a great place to be. So if you're calling yourself a Heideggerian, you have to then engage with that history. And I think one of the most honest ways to do that would be to say, well, I'm a Heideggerian. I'm a fan of Heidegger. Just say it, right? Like I'm a fan of Lacan, or I'm a fan of Foucault, or I'm a fan of Sedgwick, or whatever it is, right? And just be honest about your engagements with those particular theories, right? They give you thoughts the same way that the material gives you thoughts.
Indeed. And it's like intensity is a very good way to put it because it's always like who gets to decide like what way of interaction is like creepy and then like what way is bad? Because so much of it is like, you know, like with like train otaku, like liking a vehicle, that's fine. Trains are neat. But then, you know, if you instead of having a wife like a normal person and making children and then being in heteropatriarchy, if instead what you want to do is go out and take pictures of trains all the time in all of your free time and you have a massive collection, then that's creepy behavior. So it's kind of like
That's
I feel
right.
like
That's
all
right.
this like aversion to the intensity, I feel like always comes back to like, oh, but these people are not doing what the people are meant to be doing, which is be a good consumer and citizen and make children with your heterosexual relationship.
That's right. That's right. This is what good people do. Good people make a family, and they have like this stable relationship. You know, a friend of mine from Singapore, Cam Tam Huat, wrote this really interesting article about how otaku become basically signified as otaku, or labeled as otaku. And one thing that he said was exactly as you're pointing out, like it's like when things are taken just a little bit too far. So like
Mm,
we all like to binge Netflix, right? There's nothing wrong
mm,
with that. But when I binge Netflix for a week, maybe then I'm an otaku, right? Or like I like anime. Like who doesn't like One Piece? One Piece is great. I like girls in pantser. Well, maybe then, right? So he
mm.
basically he defines these rules, these four rules that sort of help people, so-called normal people, define who is and who isn't an otaku. And one of the things he came up with more recently was he thinks that it's a kind of a perversion of productive capacities.
Oh,
So
that is excellent.
when someone undermines their productive capacities in neoliberal, uh, immaterial labor, like the world we live in today, when you undermine your capacities, that's when you become called an otaku. So the 4 rules are as follows. You like minority things, so you don't like the majority of stuff, right? The stuff that everyone else likes, right? Um, you have a gender performance that's failed somehow. You can't communicate, and you escape from reality, right?
Mm.
And it's kind of like he's defines it as a sociologist. He defines it really carefully to the Japanese case. But the more I think about it, the more I think those 4 rules apply to a lot of different ways that we define bad fans.
Like you can be a bit
Yeah,
weird, but not weird in a way that like underlies the entire gender system. Actually, like something that I just thought of very shortly is that, like sometimes I feel like not that I'm not that much of an academic, so I don't really know, but I kind of have this imagination that like in academia, even if you say like, oh, I'm really into Heidegger, like people will not automatically assume that like, oh yeah, thus he must be a Nazi. Uh maybe. But then um I've seen people who are just like when someone says, "Oh, I really love Attack on Titan," I'm just like, "Oh, then you love like militarism and you are a Nazi." And then maybe it's kind of like maybe in academia because it's like like high thoughts, ivory tower sort of thing. Like maybe like people give you like more of like a compassion to not compassion is not the right word. Maybe like they give you more space to be like, oh yes, you're really into Heidegger, but obviously you're not racist. Whereas like with fandom, like because it's like perceived as like a lowbrow thing, and thus
yeah,
then people are just like, oh, you're a fan of this thing, and because this thing is not like high culture that necessarily, or like not that high culture necessarily involves complex thinking, because like, but like there's this perception that like because this is high culture, then you can have a complex relationship. Because that is low culture, you cannot have a complex relationship, and thus you must be a Nazi if you like Attack on Titan. So maybe
yeah,
this.
exactly. You're so right about this. Like, I think that there's a kind of bias where it's like, well, if I'm going like for theoretical attachments, then it can't be a fanish relationship. But if I'm
Mm,
going for, low culture established, like popular culture, then it can't be theoretical. Like, there can't be any reason I'm interested in this other than the fact that I am the thing that you think I am. Ideally, you bring, conversation is happening, you're bringing other people in, looping them in, all that occurs, but it isn't like an either or. I'm either academic or a fan, right? Because I think what I love about your work again is that you say that you're not an academic, and yet the way you speak in your video, talking about layers,
mm,
talking about time, talking about space, strikes me as extremely academic. So like it's
yeah.
it's it's kind of like there's a way in which I think that the Weeb Theory book that you did with Jamie is a really good example of this. You can sort of break down those boundaries and say, well, no, actually, we're in dialogue. We're
Mm.
developing ideas together.
Like I think a lot of my work sounds academic or like is academic because like I read so much academia because I got into the macadamia series when I was in the last year of university and then I was like, wow, this field exists. This is awesome. And then I just kept reading it and then I would look at people's references and I was keep reading those. And then I think I read it with the same intensity that I read a comic. Um and it's like does these two things tie together? So it's very important to me. But then maybe this whole idea of like, am I an academic came about because like academia seems like relatively limited in like how it can manifest or like like coming out as like essays and journals and then like a certain way of writing a paper, a certain language that is used, um, or like a certain way that ideas are presented, and then also I feel like visual art is like that is my language. Like I write things. I wrote the essay for the WEEP theory. I don't think it's my strongest writing, sadly. But it's not horrible, maybe. Um, but like when I was writing that or like writing all these things, all I kept thinking about is just like, whoo, I cannot wait to make a video.
But then on the other side, when you think about artistic practice, I think some of the most interesting ideas come from there. And then you have academics kind of trying to respond to what they see happening in art.
Mm,
So I think that in a way, like where you're positioned right now, where you're kind of between all three, you're between fan, academic, artist, all these things together allow you to, I think, say things that it would take someone forever to say in an essay, you can say directly through your feeling and through your poetics.